Well, this is it, the final update for 2018. It's been quite a year. Lots of things happened this year, and I usually take a moment as the year winds down to kind of pause and reflect and see what got done, see all the things we sort of like went through, talk about some plans for the future, and of course, just kind of editorialize on miniature wargaming and where we've sort of been in the last 365 days. So, what got done? Well, it was a pretty full year this year. In fact, as far as stats, this was probably the biggest year in my recollection in miniature wargaming, and of course for the channel. So in this single calendar year, I painted 885 miniatures, roughly. I'm pretty sure some got lost there, it didn't get recorded, but almost 900 models and 180 pieces of terrain. And what was really driving that was just an absolute inundation of new games, new product lines, and new launches that happened over the course of the year. Most of what got painted this year, as you watched the on the paint table from this past Saturday, you can probably see, was being driven by games that were releasing. It's just new stuff coming out, and the occasional new thing is in new codexes and stuff. But even for mainstream games like Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000, I only really painted two armies, I guess. The Sylvaneth for Age of Sigmar and the Deathwing for Warhammer 40,000 that was really new. I mean, they got books, in that time. Deathwatch got a book and the Imperial Knights got a book, but it wasn't, the new release kind of spurred on the Deathwatch, didn't really do anything to spur on the Sylvaneth. That was just kind of business as usual. But for the most part, yeah, everything that was painted in there was following kind of the waves of things that were coming out. Oh, you know what I left out? No, I didn't leave that out. I was just thinking about a game and I thought I left out of the paint pile all of a sudden. And so yeah, so it really was a hugely, I guess, frantic year of keeping up with new releases. Games Workshop continued their relentless 52 weeks a year release schedule with something new coming out absolutely every single week. And the rest of the wargaming industry did their best to kind of keep up. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we come back to the end. But it did lead to me trying, we played 33 new games that I painted models for. We played a few new games that I didn't need to paint models for, like I could use my existing collections of miniatures for. But it was a huge, just wave of stuff. And there was 180 pieces of terrain to go with that, all for various projects. And they really piled up as well. And that's not counting, of course, all the terrain that I built and painted or just weathered that was pre-painted. There was a huge selection of that too. There was the Bandua Ready for Battle stuff, all the great stuff from Foregrounds and from Black Site Studio. That's all pre-weathered and pre-colored and stuff. So it was a lot of stuff. I released 400 and change battle reports. So it was 252 times 2, no, 5 times 5, 250, 260 that were just like the weekly scheduled ones. And there was roughly it was 300 and change. 305, I think is what it was. Because there was roughly 40 or 50 more on top of the weekly ones that were just like events that I covered or ran, Saturday, Let's Plays and stuff like that for various books coming out. There was almost one of those a week on top of it. So it broke 300 battle reports this year, which means I played at least 300 games, probably more, because there's still, of course, all of the scheduled content going out into the future on top of that. And you folks at this point have watched almost, I think it was 3 or 4 million minutes of video. There's one video that actually broke 1 million minutes, and that was the Let's Play for Blackstone Fortress. People watched 1 million minutes of just that one episode, which I found insane. I had my highest views video so far in the lifetime of the channel. It's got like 140,000 views, I think, at this point, which was the Let's Play for Kill Team, Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team. And I released my first miniature wargame. Osprey Games and I published Last Day Zombie Apocalypse, which was my foray into game design from a few years back, but I'm happy to say that that's gone really well. And on top of that, there are a couple of new things in the pipe. I got 2 more contracts with them to do an expansion for Last Days, and then something new that you'll hear more about in the new year as I start rumbling about that too, which is a different game. So yeah, it's been a pretty momentous year as far as things that got done. So let's talk a little bit about the industry in general, and let's talk about miniature wargaming as a whole, because there's 2 trends that I kind of want to discuss. So the first trend I would say is that miniature wargaming's biggest player, of course, which is of course Games Workshop, has entered the digital age this year. In 2018, they really made a push as far as their digital footprint. The Warhammer community team has been more active than ever before. It's expanded to include a whole bunch of new people, and they've grown their viewership to over 250,000 viewers, which means in the next couple months they will become the biggest source for miniature wargaming stuff digitally. And that's a really interesting place for them to be, considering that when I started this, they had less subscribers, less of a footprint in just like media than I do now. So in the last 3.5 years, they've grown 10 times as fast as I have. And they will probably have, I would imagine that that's just going to continue to escalate. I'm betting they have 500,000 viewers soon, and will absolutely be the biggest player in the world as far as their digital footprint. And what's really interesting about that is the impact I think that it's had on miniature wargaming as a whole, because the sort of previous clear seas of miniature wargaming, where you could get a signal out to customers if you were a tiny little company and you could kind of communicate with them directly and be heard, has become very loudly overshadowed by, I would say, the relentlessness of the digital output from the biggest player. So it's been a really interesting year. It's been interesting to watch happen, kind of from inside of it and from outside of it. It kind of peaked, I would say, around March of last year. And there was a definite crescendo in 2017 with the 40K release, as they just sort of like dominated the conversations, continued to grow. So it's been really interesting to see that happening. And I think that's been really good for a lot of reasons. I think that it's mainstream miniature wargaming a bit. The excellent performance, of course, Workshop had was picked up by the market and in the mainstream media now. They've become newsworthy in that their business is growing and growing and growing, and that's led to more attention, I think, in the industry in general, which can only be positive. As of course the customer base and potential sort of like mainstreaming of the hobby grows, the more money out there floats around for little companies to also take part and share in, which has been really good. And then let's talk about the other trend I've noticed in miniature wargaming that I'm a bit disturbed by. And so this is my other thing I think that happened in 2018. 2018 was the year that miniature wargaming became a bit Hollywood. And what do I mean by I say Hollywood? Well, there's been a trend in Hollywood picked up on by actually most importantly financial folks, noticing that Hollywood has only really greenlit for production sure things, and that's prequels, sequels, and based on books, like based on intellectual property. That's become a bit of a trend in 2018 in mainstream, actually just in wargaming in general. We've seen the release of lots of licensed products, everything from Fallout to A Song of Ice and Fire to the Middle Earth SBG getting a new edition, to prequels, sequels, and remakes. So things like the sort of like return of Adeptus Titanicus, where people are mining their back catalogs for stuff and bringing it back basically for kind of a nostalgia boost. And that's a very Hollywood trend, where you remake, make a sequel to something, a new edition of Warhammer 40K, a new edition of Kill Team, because Kill Team was around prior to this. It was just called, it was a different animal, but it was a previous iteration. And things like Blitz Bowl, which is Crunch, a fast play version of Blood Bowl. So I'm a bit disturbed by that, because in the same time there have been, and if you watch my top five lists, a lot of really cool games coming out that I think deserve a second look. But they've kind of been drowned in a very frantic, fast wave of releases that are more sure things. So prequels, sequels, and remakes. Horus Heresy, the prequel. The sequel being a new edition of a game. And of course, the based on books, lots of licensed products out there too. So I really do hope that that, I don't want to say, I don't want it to stop, because I think there's cool things out there that can still be mined. Other base books, right? Star Wars Legion, how can I not mention that? But I do hope that there's still some room out there for creativity, because it seems like the niche miniature war game, the sort of like creative space miniature wargaming, is becoming more niche in this past year, and I do think that there's some creative danger there if we get too far into sequels, prequels, and based on a book. So there it is, my editorial and my roundup for 2018. I hope you enjoyed watching GMG over the past year. We'll see you for lots more great content next year. Happy New Year to everybody watching. Until next time, I'm Ash. Not forgetting. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to support the channel, of course, like and subscribe and hit the little bell below so you get notifications when I post future content. I do post stuff 7 days a week. If you want to support the channel further, you can, of course, buy a t-shirt through Spreadshirts, buy a measuring gauge or objective markers from Deathray Designs, or, of course, most importantly, there is Patreon. Patreon is what makes all this possible, keeps the lights on, pays for the studio costs, pays for the equipment, model costs, and everything else, and most importantly, puts food in my kids' bellies and a roof over their heads. Big thanks to everyone, past, future, who supported me. I do this stuff because of you guys, and of course, I will continue doing it as long as I can.